Greetings everyone, in this video I will show you how to create a magical plasma orb. We are going to use shader graph and VFX graph for a better result. Create a new Unity project using high definition render pipeline template. There is no difference, if you want you can use the URP. We have two textures which I downloaded from the internet, you can get them from the description. Let's create a default sphere and create new material for it. Enable the emission, then click on the color palette and choose the color you like. Increase the intensity to have the glow in the scene. Now let's create the outer sphere and make it the double size of the inner sphere, then drag it to the inside of orb. Let's create new material for outer sphere and then create a shader graph and attach it to this material. The first thing we need to do is to make the sphere transparent and renders what behind it. To make the material renders what's behind it, we need only two nodes. Screen position to get the position of each point behind the material, and then blended with scene color to get the color of each point at the exact location, then we link those to the emission on the master node. Now you can see the sphere renders what's behind it perfectly. Now we will create scrolling textures to give the feeling of an electric field going inside the sphere. So create texture property and sample texture node. To scroll the texture over time, so we need a time node and also a property called scrolling speed. Then multiply the time to scrolling speed. Then create a tiling offset node to can have UV moving with linking the result to offset. Now we can create another sample texture 2D and make it move opposite way of the first one. Then we can add these textures and multiply them with a color. Link the result to the base color. In previous Unity versions it was called albedo. Group all the nodes related to scrolling texture. Let's go back to the scene. Now we can add the texture and see the electric waves textures moving around surface of the sphere. If your Unity like me doesn't show the texture moving in the scene, you can adjust that to always refresh, then it works great. Now to give the sphere a feeling of it's made of liquid or plasma, we need to move the vertices of this sphere based on the normal direction of each point. For access to each vertices of this sphere, we need position node and change the space to object. To move each point over time, create a time node and then a float parameter for surface movement speed. Then multiply that with time. Then add that to the position. To get a random noise for each vertex of this sphere, we need simple noise node. Now let's create a parameter to control the noise scale, then multiply that with the result of simple noise. Then add the normal vector node, because we want to move each vertices in the direction it's facing. And finally, we add all the changes we did to the original position of each vertices using the position node. Then link the output to the vertex position. Now let's make the light distortion. We need a twirl node. To move the twirl node, let's create a time node and property for control the speed. Gradient noise, which controls the movement over time. Until now it's just a texture. A magical trick here is to add a normal from height, which converts this texture to a normal map. Then we multiply this by screen position. Then we added it again to the screen position. We link it to scene color. As final, we can make it more interesting by controlling the edges of this sphere with a Fresnel effect. And like always, time node, but this time we need the cosine time, which represents loops between -1 and 1. Connect it to the remap, 2 can change the output. And color for Fresnel effect, then add this with texture scrolling. That's it. Now be sure to change the values in the inspector to get the best result. By adding a visual effect graph, we can have more interesting to have some sort of like electricity moving around it or something like sunrise. So let's create one. If you haven't visual effect graph, you can add it in the package manager. Then drag it into the scene and make it the child of our sphere. The first step is to delete everything because the normal system or default system is not useful for us. So after deleting, press space and create a simple head and trails system. We want everything, in the end, to be controlled by the inspector, so first, we need a parameter for the spawn rate. Make it exposed so we can adjust it from the inspector. We don't need set velocity random, so let's delete it. I want to trails go inside a sphere shape, so let's add a new node position sphere. It makes it go to a sphere shape. We also want to control the color gradient, so let's create another property. For controlling the time left of particles, let's create two properties, one of them minimum lifetime and the other maximum lifetime. To control the size of this sphere, let's create another property and link it to radius of sphere. Increase the capacity in the initialized particles. And do the same for initialize particle strip. Here, add conform to the sphere, which is tried to force trails to stay inside the sphere. It has a lot of parameters that can change the effect. So let's create property for each one. Now just change the values to get the desired shape. Thanks for watching, don't forget to sub and like.